Every December, a peculiar form of mass sleepwalking descends upon the Western world. It is a season of inverted logic. Millions of people engage in the systematic destruction of evergreen foliage, or they purchase convincing simulacra of such foliage, dragging these fragrant or plastic skeletons into the heart of their homes. They adorn the branches with fragile, reflective orbs and strings of captured miniature lightning. They crown this indoor thicket with a symbol of celestial guidance or a divine messenger. They surround its base with disguised boxes, their contents a mystery, until a prescribed moment of collective ripping and tearing. They drape empty socks along a shelf of cold brick and ash. They tell their children, with faces of utmost seriousness, that an ancient, omnipotent man clad in fur lives in a frozen palace at the top of the world. This man maintains a list, they whisper. He knows the precise sleeping and waking rhythms of every child. He has a categorical understanding of their moral worth, of every whispered lie and every grudgingly completed chore. And once a year, in a single night of global logistical miracle, he bypasses all locks and security systems, favouring the sooty, archaic passage of the chimney. Parents, the supposed guardians against strangers, actively facilitate this fantasy. They bring their wide-eyed children to temples of commerce, to sit upon this immortal trespasser's knee, to breathe their most private wishes into his bearded ear. He offers a contract of pure behaviorism. Goodness will be materially rewarded. This elaborate, years-long conspiracy is maintained with forensic creativity. Doubting children are gently, persistently reassured with fabricated proof. Evidence is manufactured and placed with care. Half-eaten cookies rest on a plate. Carrots bear the marks of unseen teeth. Sooty footprints appear on clean hearths. Letters arrive in carefully disguised script, postmarked from Arctic realms. The myth is curated, defended, and embellished until the child's own cognitive development forces a crisis. Then, in a quiet moment, the revelation comes. It was all a fiction. The surveillance, the flight, the gifts, the man himself. It was a beautiful, sustained lie conducted by the most trusted people in the child's universe. The child is expected to absorb this fundamental betrayal of reality, to be grateful for it, and to eventually perpetuate it. If you described this sequence of events stripped of its cultural cushion, if you presented it coldly to an observer from another world, it would sound not like a holiday, but like a widespread benign psychosis. It has the logic of a fever dream, the scale of a mass hallucination. It is a societal ritual where the original incantations have been forgotten, but the intricate motions are performed with greater fervour than ever. And in a very real sense, that is exactly what it is. Christmas is the gravitational centre of the Western year. It moves hundreds of billions of dollars in its orbit. It colonises 2 full months of the calendar, its music seeping into public spaces long before and lingering long after its official day. It defines childhood memories, strains family finances, and is powered by a mythology so deeply embedded in our psyche that we've become numb to its profound strangeness. Almost nothing about the Christmas we celebrate is what we believe it to be. The date is a historical placeholder. The traditions are borrowed, often forcibly taken. The jolly gift-giving icon is the product of a millennia-long game of theological and cultural telephone. The timeless, ancient feeling of it all was largely manufactured in the last 2 centuries and then aggressively sold back to us. We have wrapped a planet encircling commercial engine in the tissue paper of sentiment. Let us unwrap it. Not the presents under the tree, but the holiday itself. Let us peel back the layers, the glittering foil of commerce, the painted plaster of Victorian invention, the gilded leaf of Christian adaptation, to see what lies beneath. We will follow the tangled roots down through dark, cold soil. Before the Christmas tree, before the Christ child, before the church or the empire, there was only the dying of the light. In the northern hemisphere, as the year withered, the sun weakened. Its arc across the sky grew shallow and feeble. Shadows lengthened, swallowing the world bite by bite. The cold was not merely an inconvenience, it was an existential whisper. For peoples without electric grids or central heating, without the scientific understanding of planetary tilt, this annual retreat of the sun was a terror that gripped the gut. What if this time the light did not return? Life, warmth, growth, time itself, all were functions of that distant fire. Its apparent weakening was the world dying. And then, at the very nadir of the year, around December 21st, the decline would halt, the solstice, the longest night. The sun would pause at its lowest, weakest point, as if gathering its last strength. And then, imperceptibly at first, it would begin its slow climb back. The days, minute by agonizing minute, would lengthen. The sun had not been defeated. It had turned. It was reborn. This was not just an astronomical observation. It was the central drama of human survival. It demanded celebration, ritual, pleading, and thanks. Every culture north of the equator developed a winter solstice festival. They were all, at their core, festivals of light against darkness, communal prayers for the sun's return. December 25th sits in the quiet, hopeful days just after this solstice, close enough for ancient peoples to witness the confirmed return of the light. This placement is not coincidence, it is causation. Christmas occupies this date because the date was already sacred, already pulsing with pagan hope long before a manger was mentioned in Bethlehem. In Rome, the weeks surrounding the solstice were given over to Saturnalia, a festival in honour of Saturn, god of time, agriculture and liberation. Beginning around December 17th, Roman society consciously, joyfully unspun itself. Schools and courts closed. Gambling, normally illegal, was permitted. Social hierarchies were not just relaxed, but actively inverted. Masters served meals to their slaves. Slaves could speak freely, even mock their masters without fear. A lord of misrule, often a low-born citizen or a slave, was crowned to preside over the festivities. Gifts were exchanged, small tokens like candles, wax figurines, or gag gifts called sigillaria. Homes were decked with greenery, laurel, ivy, holly. Candles blazed against the deepening night. It was a week of feasting, drinking, and sanctioned chaos. The poet Catullus called it the best of days. Does any of this sound familiar? The gift-giving, the feasting, the greenery, the time off work, the suspension of normal rules. Saturnalia was Christmas, minus the Christ. But Saturnalia ended around December 23rd. The Roman festival calendar had another card to play. In 274 AD, Emperor Aurelian established a new official holiday, Dis Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the unconquered sun. This feast honoured Sol Invictus, a powerful sun god whose cult Aurelian promoted. The date chosen was December 25th. Why? Because it fell just after the solstice, the moment the unconquered sun proved its title by definitively reversing its decline. The sun was born anew. So, as the rowdy democratic chaos of Saturnalia wound down, the official imperial celebration of the sun's natalis began. The Roman world thus enjoyed a nearly 2-week-long winter festival season, a rolling celebration of light's victory over darkness, of chaos tamed by order, centred on the rebirth of the sun. Into this world, a world that already knew with absolute certainty that December the 25th was the birthday of a god, came Christianity. The early church faced a formidable competitor not in another religion, but in a deeply felt seasonal rhythm. The people were not going to stop their solstice parties. The pull of the dying light was too strong. So, around the 4th century, as Christianity became the state religion, a strategic and brilliant absorption took place. The church, in essence, rebranded the sun's birthday. The linguistic hook was convenient. The birth of the Son of God could supersede the birth of the sun. Pope Julius III is often cited as formalising December 25th as the Feast of the Nativity around 350 AD. The message was pragmatic. Keep your parties, keep your lights, keep your feasts, but redirect the devotion. The true light conquering the world's darkness was not a celestial ball of plasma, but a Jewish baby in a feed trough. It was a masterstroke of theological marketing. Christmas was born not from the sanctification of a historical date, but from the calculated baptism of a pagan one. Far to the north, in the deep forests of Germania and the fjords of Scandinavia, other solstice traditions thrived under different names. They called it Yule. It was a midwinter festival lasting roughly 12 days. a time when the normal business of life was suspended for survival and propitiation. The Yule log was not a decorative cake. It was an enormous, carefully selected oak or ash trunk, dragged into the great hall with ceremony and set ablaze. The lighting of the Yule log was a sympathetic magic ritual. Its fire, representing the sun's heat and light, had to be kept burning for the entire 12 days. To let it die out was to invite catastrophe, to risk the sun's permanent failure. The feast was one of necessity. Animals that could not be fed through the winter were slaughtered now, their blood offered to the gods, their meat preserved and consumed to sustain the people through the darkest months. The air in the longhouse would have been thick with wood smoke, the scent of roasting meat and the palpable anxiety of a world holding its breath. The gods of Yule were not gentle. Odin, the All-Father, was particularly associated with this time. During the wild hunt, a ghostly cavalcade of the dead was said to ride the storm winds of the longest nights. Odin, an old man with a long white beard, led this spectral parade, flying through the frigid air on his 8-legged horse Sleipnir. His ravens, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, flew across the world, observing all deeds and reporting back to him. He knew who was generous and who was miserly, who was brave and who was deceitful. The imagery is uncanny. An ancient bearded watcher from a distant wintry place, travelling through the sky on a magical steed, possessing knowledge of all human behaviour. The echoes are not subtle. Alongside Odin came other figures. The Yule goat, initially a symbol of Thor and later a gift-giver in its own right in Scandinavia, and evergreens, pine, fir, holly. Bringing these symbols of persistent life into the home was an act of hope, a theft of life's magic from the grip of dead winter. When Christian missionaries pushed north, they encountered these deeply rooted Yule traditions. They could not eradicate them. The solution, again, was absorption. The 12 days of Yule became the 12 days of Christmas. The Yule log, stripped of its explicit pagan magic, became a quaint Christmas tradition. The evergreen boughs were reinterpreted as symbols of eternal life in Christ. And the figure of Odin, the flying, watching, bearded patriarch, drifted into the cultural memory bank from which a new figure would one day be assembled. The Church did not simply overwrite paganism, it negotiated a merger. Christmas became a container, a vessel into which the winter hopes and fears of countless conquered cultures were poured, stirred, and given a new label. But what of the central figure of this newly minted holiday? When was Jesus of Nazareth actually born? The Bible is conspicuously, frustratingly silent on the matter. The Gospels of Matthew and Luke describe the Nativity, but they provide no date. They offer clues that later scholars would pick over like detectives at a cold case. Luke mentions shepherds living in the fields, keeping watch over their flocks by night. In the hill country of Judea, shepherds did not typically keep their flocks outdoors in the dead of winter. The cold and rain from November to February drove them and their animals into shelters. This pastoral detail strongly suggests a birth in spring or autumn, not late December. Early Christian writers themselves were divided. Some, like Clement of Alexandria in the 2nd century, proposed dates in spring. Others argued for autumn. December 25th was not on their radar. The celebration of birthdays at all was considered a pagan, even a sinful practice by many early Christians. They celebrated the death days of martyrs, their heavenly birthdays, not their earthly ones. So the choice of December 25th stands exposed. It was not a discovery of historical truth, but a strategic declaration of theological truth. It was the Church planting its flag on the most psychologically powerful pre-existing festival ground it could find. The pagans had the sun, the Christians had the sun. It was a metaphorical argument made calendar real. This act of cultural appropriation was breathtakingly successful. Within a few centuries, Christmas was established across the Christian world, but it was a Trojan horse holiday. It carried within it all the pagan cargo it had absorbed. The date, the decorations, the feasting, the lights, the sense of carnival. Only the theological justification was new. The body of the celebration was old, very old. This foundational act of borrowing set a pattern. Christmas would forever be a hybrid, a shapeshifter, and its next great transformation would revolve not around a date or a symbol, but around a person. A saint would be taken from history, dipped in legend, stretched by folklore, and repackaged for entirely new purposes. He would begin as a historically shadowy bishop from Asia Minor, become a wonder-working defender of orthodoxy who allegedly punched a heretic, and then embark on a long, strange journey north and west, morphing into the figure we now call Santa Claus. But before the red suit and the reindeer, there was a man named Nicholas, and his story was anything but jolly. The historical Nicholas is a man who exists just on the edge of documentary light. We know he was likely born around 270 AD in Patara, a port city in Lycia, in what is now the southern coast of Turkey. He became the bishop of Myra, another Lycian city, and died around 343 AD. These are the bare, skeletal facts. He lived through a seismic shift in history, from the last great persecution of Christians under Emperor Diocletian to the sudden, stunning adoption of Christianity as the Roman Empire's official religion under Constantine. He may have been imprisoned for his faith. He likely attended the monumental Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, where the foundational doctrines of Christianity were hammered out against the anvil of heresy. But the man himself left no writings. No contemporary chronicle details his life. The Nicholas who steps into history is a figure already thickly wrapped in legend, a holy silhouette upon which communities projected their deepest needs for protection, justice, and miraculous intervention. The legends are where the character ignites. They are not gentle bedtime stories. They are tales of desperate poverty, violent death, and theological fury. The most famous, the one that would most directly seed the Christmas tradition, involves 3 daughters and bags of gold. In the story, a poor man in Myra faced destitution. He had 3 daughters of marriageable age, but in the Roman world, a woman without a dowry had no future. The grim options were slavery or prostitution. Nicholas, hearing of this plight, took action under cover of night. He approached the man's house and threw a bag of gold through an open window, providing a dowry for the eldest daughter. He repeated this act twice more for the second and third daughters. In some versions, the gold lands in stockings left by the fire to dry. The core of the myth is secret, anonymous generosity, salvation delivered in the dark, asking for no thanks. This is the pristine, powerful core of the gift-giving saint. The 3 bags of gold would later morph into the 3 golden bulls that became the symbol of pawnbrokers, who oddly adopted Nicholas as their patron. The stockings by the fire would become Christmas stockings. The clandestine night visit would become the paradigm for Santa's annual unseen entry. A second legend is far darker, a grisly folk tale that reveals the medieval mind's comfort with holy terror. A terrible famine gripped Myra. In the depths of this desperation, a butcher, sometimes called an innkeeper, lured 3 travelling schoolboys into his shop. He murdered them, dismembered their bodies, and packed the pieces into a brine-filled barrel, intending to sell the meat as pickled pork. Nicholas, through divine insight, discovered the crime. He confronted the butcher, then approached the barrel. He prayed, made the sign of the cross over it, and the 3 boys stepped forth, whole and alive, resurrected from their salted grave. This story was told for centuries as a testament to Nicholas's power and his particular guardianship of children. It is a staggering narrative to associate with the forerunner of Santa Claus. The modern figure brings toys. His predecessor reassembled murdered children from a butcher's pickling tub. This Nicholas is not a merry elf. He is a warrior against the most profound evils, a rescuer from the belly of human darkness. Then there is the violence, the temper that paints the saint in vivid, aggressive colours. At the Council of Nicaea, the most heated debate raged between the orthodox view of Christ's divinity and the teachings of Arius, a priest who argued Christ was a created being, subordinate to God the Father. The legend states that Nicholas, a fervent opponent of Arianism, became so enraged by Arius's arguments that he crossed the council floor and struck the heretic across the face. Some accounts say he punched him. A bishop committing assault during Christianity's most important theological summit was a scandal. Nicholas was stripped of his episcopal robes and thrown into prison. But then, in his cell, he received a visitation. Christ and the Virgin Mary appeared to him, restoring his vestments and his gospel book, a clear sign of divine approval. The bishops, chastened by the miracle, released him and reinstated him. For centuries this story was celebrated. Icons depicted Nicholas, hand-raised, striking Arius. It was seen not as a loss of control, but as a righteous defence of truth. Santa Claus, in his deepest ancestral memory, once punched a man over a doctrinal dispute. The Nicholas that emerges from these early centuries is a complex, formidable figure. He is a secret benefactor, a resurrecting protector, and a violent defender of the faith. He is a patron, but also a partisan. He is a figure of comfort, but one forged in the fires of persecution and theological war. This was the saint whose fame spread, carried on the currents of trade and pilgrimage. His body, entombed in Myra, was said to secrete a miraculous healing oil called asterisk, myrrh asterisk, or asterisk manna asterisk, making his shrine a destination for the hopeful and the ill. Then, in 1087, his bones were stolen. In a brazen act of holy piracy, Italian merchants from the bustling port city of Bari sailed to Myra, which was then under threat from Seljuk Turkish advances. Claiming they were rescuing the relics from desecration, they broke into the church, smashed open the saint's tomb and took his skeletal remains. They brought them triumphantly to Bari, where they were enshrined in a great new basilica. The theft, though a crime, was a public relations masterstroke. It made Nicholas a major saint in Western Europe almost overnight. His cult exploded. He became the patron saint of not just children but also sailors, merchants, pawnbrokers, and countless cities. His feast day, December 6th, the anniversary of his death, or perhaps the translation of his relics, became a day of gift-giving and celebration, particularly for children. The Dutch, especially fervent in their devotion, called him asterisk Sinterklaas asterisk, a contraction of asterisk Sint Nicolaas asterisk. In the Netherlands, Sinterklaas developed a distinct and elaborate folklore. He was no longer a distant heavenly saint, but an annual visitor. He lived curiously in Spain, his detail perhaps born from trade links or a sense of exotic distance. Each year in mid-November he would arrive by steamboat at a Dutch port, greeted by immense public celebration. He wore the full regalia of a bishop, a long red cape or casubal, a tall elaborate mitre, and he carried a jewelled crozier. He had a long white beard. He rode a majestic white horse named Amerigo that could somehow traverse rooftops. On the eve of his feast day, December 5th, children would leave their shoes by the fireplace or hearth, filled with hay and carrots for the horse. If they had been good, Sinterklaas would replace the fodder with gifts, sweets and spices. If they had been naughty, they would be left with a bundle of twigs or a lump of coal. But the Dutch tradition held a crucial, unsettling feature that most modern Christmas narratives have eagerly forgotten. Sinterklaas never travelled alone. The problem of the gift-giving saint was a moral one. If rewards were distributed for good behaviour, what was the consequence for bad? A system of pure reward lacked teeth, lacked a moral compass. It devolved into mere entitlement. For the tradition to have weight to truly shape behaviour, it needed a counterbalance, a shadow. Across Europe, this shadow took myriad forms, each more terrifying than the last. For centuries, Christmas was not solely a season of joy. It was equally a season of fear, a time when children were reminded that darkness had its own agents, and they were coming. The most famous of these figures is Krampus. In the Alpine regions of Austria, Bavaria, and parts of Italy, Krampus is the dark companion to St. Nicholas. His name derives from the German asterisk, Krampen asterisk, meaning claw. He is a half-goat, half-demon creature. His body is covered in shaggy dark fur. He has cloven hooves, twisted horns, a lolling red tongue, and eyes that gleam with malevolent intent. He is the monstrous antithesis of the saintly bishop. On Krampusnacht, the night of December 5th, he accompanies St. Nicholas. While Nicholas dispenses gifts to the good children, Krampus deals with the wicked. He carries a bundle of birch switches, asterisk root asterisk, for beating the naughty. He lugs heavy, rusty chains that he drags and rattles ominously. Most terrifying of all, he carries a large basket or sack on his back. This is not for delivering presents. It is for carrying away the irredeemably bad children, whom he stuffs into the bag to drag off to his mountain lair or directly to hell. The threat was literal and visceral. Misbehaviour could result in abduction and eternal damnation. Krampusnacht persists. In alpine villages, men don incredibly elaborate, grotesque costumes and carved wooden masks. They form Krampuslaufer. Krampus runs, charging through snowy streets, chasing spectators, swatting them with their switches, their chains clanging, bells jangling. It is a cathartic, chaotic, and genuinely frightening spectacle, a deliberate unleashing of the ID in the heart of the disciplined Christmas season. The Church and later authoritarian regimes tried to suppress Krampus, seeing him as a pagan or disorderly influence. But he always returned. He represented something too fundamental to the psychological ecosystem of the holiday, the necessary darkness that gives light its meaning. Other regions had their own versions. In France, the dark companion was Père Fouettard, Father Whipper. His origin story is directly tied to the grisly legend of the 3 pickled boys. In this version, the butcher who murdered the children is condemned to follow St. Nicholas forever as punishment, transformed into a ragged, soot-blackened figure who carries a bundle of switches. His eternal penance is to whip the naughty children. Here, the horror is layered. The Punisher is himself a redeemed monster, a child killer forced into the role of disciplinarian. The lesson is about penance and the frightening proximity of evil, even to saints. In German-speaking Pennsylvania Dutch communities in America, the figure was Belsnickel. A far more ambiguous and psychological terror, Belsnickel was a ragged, fur-clad man, his face dirty, his demeanour unpredictable. He didn't work in a clear duo with a saint. He was the sole arbiter, combining threat and reward in a confusing, stressful performance. He would burst into a house where children were gathered, often unannounced. He carried a switch in one hand and pockets full of candies and nuts in the other. He would quiz the children on their catechism, their prayers, their behaviour. Those who answered well might receive a treat thrown at their feet, but as they scrambled to pick it up, he would often swat at their hands or backs with his switch. The pleasure was inextricably mingled with the pain. The message was that scrutiny was constant, and even reward came with a sting of judgment. Perhaps the most controversial of these figures is Zwarte Piet, Black Pete, the companion of the Dutch Sinterklaas. Traditionally portrayed by white performers in full black face, with exaggerated red lips, curly wigs, and Renaissance page costumes, Piet is presented as a playful, mischievous helper. The common modern explanation is that his face is blackened from soot as he climbs down chimneys to deliver gifts. Critics forcefully argue the character is an undeniable racial caricature, rooted in colonial stereotypes and the imagery of subservient black servants. Defenders cling to the tradition as innocent folk culture. The annual debates in the Netherlands are fierce, revealing how these folkloric shadows can carry the uncomfortable, unexamined baggage of a culture's history. Zwarte Piet shows that the Dark Companion was never just about frightening children. It could also reflect and reinforce societal hierarchies and prejudices. In Iceland, the Christmas season dispensed with the saint altogether and leaned fully into terror. There, the ogress Grilla descends from the mountains during Christmas. She has hooves, 13 tails, and an insatiable appetite for misbehaving children, whom she stuffs into her sack to boil in her cave. Her sons are the Yule lads, 13 trollish brothers who arrive one by one in the 13 nights before Christmas. Originally they were purely mischievous or malicious spirits who would steal meat, slam doors, or peep through windows. Today, somewhat sanitized, they have become gift givers, leaving small presents and shoes left on windowsills, or rotten potatoes for the naughty. And there is the Yule cat, Jolakotterin, a monstrous feline that prowls the countryside and devours anyone who did not receive new clothes for Christmas. This was a blunt, effective piece of social engineering, using fear to ensure that even the poorest workers received at least one new garment before the holiday. The purpose of all these figures was multifaceted. They enforced morality. They gave weight to the concept of being good. But on a deeper level, they gave form to the very real terrors of winter. The darkness, the cold, the hunger, the isolation that could kill. By personifying these threats as a specific monster with a specific set of rules, be good, say your prayers, get new clothes, communities could exert a sense of control. The rituals tamed the chaos of the season by giving it a face and a procedure. Modern American Christmas, in its relentless pursuit of cheer, has amputated this shadow self. The worst consequence is now a symbolic lump of coal. The moral stakes have been flattened, and with them, perhaps, a layer of the holiday's ancient psychological depth has been lost. We have kept the light but tried to pretend the darkness never existed. And yet, there was a group who saw through all of it. The pagan roots, the chaotic celebrations, the thin Christian veneer, and found the entire holiday not just empty, but evil. They were the Puritans, and in the 17th century they did not try to reform Christmas. They tried to erase it. The Puritans possessed a clarity of vision that was both brutal and illuminating. They read their Bibles, and they read the early church fathers. They knew the historical facts we have just traced. They knew December 25th was not in Scripture. They knew it was the old feast of Sol Invictus. They knew the evergreen boughs and the festive license were pagan imports. For them, the conclusion was inescapable. Christmas was not a slightly imperfect Christian holiday. It was a pagan festival wearing a stolen Christian mask. It was a perfect specimen of the kind of idolatrous worldly corruption that had, in their view, fatally compromised the Roman Catholic Church. Their project was to purify Christianity, to scrape away the accumulated grime of centuries and return to the pristine scriptural faith of the apostles. And the apostles did not celebrate Christmas, but their objection was not merely historical or theological, it was intensely practical and moral. They looked at how Christmas was actually celebrated in 17th century England, and they saw not a holy day, but a bacchanal. The medieval traditions of Saturnalia had never fully died. The 12 days from December the 25th to Epiphany on January 6th remained a prolonged period of mandated festivity and social disorder. Work stopped, schools closed, and in the vacuum, what rushed in was precisely what the Puritans most despised. Drunkenness was the engine of the celebration. Wassailing, a tradition of travelling door to door singing for food and drink, often devolved into drunken mobs demanding refreshment with thinly veiled threats. The Lord of Misrule was still appointed in many towns and great households, a carnival king who presided over a temporary world where masters served servants and the normal hierarchies were gleefully overturned. Gambling was rampant, sexual license flourished, aided by games like kissing under the mistletoe and the general atmosphere of riot. Christmas in practice was a festival of gluttony, inebriation and lust. For Puritans obsessed with sober piety, disciplined work, and sexual propriety, it was a concentrated symbol of everything sinful and backward. Furthermore, it was popish. The very name Christmas tied it irrevocably to the Catholic liturgy, to the idolatry of the Mass, to the superstitions of saints and rituals from which Protestant England had supposedly broken free. Christmas smelled of incense and old Rome. It was the enemy within. When the Puritans gained political power during the English Civil War, they moved with decisive, joyless efficiency. In 1647, the Puritan-controlled Parliament passed an ordinance abolishing the feast of Christmas altogether. The law declared that December 25th should be observed not as a feast, but as a day of fasting and humiliation. Shops and markets were ordered to stay open. Churches were to remain closed. There would be no special services, no feasting, no public recognition of the day. Christmas was simply illegal. Enforcement was another matter. The tradition was too deeply rooted in the muscle memory of the people. Soldiers were sent to patrol the streets on December 25th, tearing down festive greenery, breaking up gatherings, and forcing merchants to keep their stalls open. The result was not quiet compliance, but open rebellion. In Canterbury in 1647, riots erupted when the town crier announced the ban. Mobs smashed the shops of merchants who dared to open for business. Christmas decorations appeared in defiant profusion. Similar Christmas riots broke out across the country. In private homes, behind closed shutters, people celebrated anyway, holding secret feasts and whispering carols. The holiday was driven underground, but it did not die. pamphleteers published passionate defences of old Christmas, personifying the holiday as a kindly wronged old man being hounded by sour-faced killjoys. The image of the fun-hating Puritan was cemented in this period. The ban lasted until 1660, with the restoration of the monarchy. King Charles II brought back the theatres, the maypoles and Christmas, but the Puritan interregnum had done lasting damage. It had broken the continuous chain of communal celebration. Many of the older, wilder traditions, like the formal Lord of Misrule, faded away. Christmas was restored, but it was weakened, a lesser holiday in the English calendar. Its great revival would require not a king but a novelist, a poet and a queen. The Puritan colonists in New England carried this antipathy across the Atlantic. In 1659, the Massachusetts Bay Colony made observing Christmas by forbearing of labour, feasting, or any other way a punishable offence, with a fine of 5 shillings. The ban was more than law, it was cultural orthodoxy. To celebrate Christmas was to mark oneself as un-English, or worse, papist. The ban was officially repealed in 1681 under pressure from the English crown, but the cultural stigma lingered for generations. In much of colonial America, December the 25th was a regular business day. The first Congress under the new US Constitution held a session on December 25th, 1789. Christmas was not a federal holiday in the United States until 1870. The America that would later become the global engine of Christmas consumerism was founded, in part, by people who wanted nothing to do with it. By the early 1800s, Christmas in both Britain and America was at a low ebb. It was a minor, fading holiday, associated more with rowdy, drunken gatherings of the lower classes than with respectable family life. It was, for all intents and purposes, dying. And then, within a few remarkable decades, it was completely reinvented, resurrected in a new image that was domestic, sentimental, child-centred and brimming with commercial potential. This reinvention was not an organic folk process. It was a deliberate project carried out by writers, artists and royals. The first architect of the new Christmas was an American writer nostalgic for an England he idealised. In 1819-20, Washington Irving published Asterisk, the Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon Asterisk. While remembered for Rip Van Winkle and the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, it also contained a series of essays depicting a cosy, harmonious and utterly fictional English Christmas at a rural manor. Irving painted a picture of the squire welcoming all his tenants and servants into the great hall for a feast of ancient games, of roaring Yule logs, and of intergenerational warmth. It was a beautiful fantasy of social harmony and timeless tradition. The fact that this past was largely invented did not matter. Irving gave the emerging middle class a yearning, a template for what Christmas asterisk should asterisk feel like. He manufactured nostalgia for a world that never quite was, and in doing so, created the demand for its realisation. Then came the poem. In 1823, the anonymously published A Visit from St. Nicholas appeared in a New York newspaper. Attributed to Clement Clarke Moore, though debate persists, this single piece of verse did more to crystallise the modern Santa Claus than any other document. It gave us the names of the 8 reindeer. It established the chimney as the entry point. It described a jolly old elf, plump, bearded and dressed in fur, carrying a sack of toys. It codified the nighttime visit on Christmas Eve. Moore's saint was no longer the thin, bishoply Sinterklaas or the fierce wonderworker Nicholas. He was a domestic elf, a creature of magic and gift-giving, stripped of any remaining religious or punitive function. The poem was reprinted, illustrated, and memorized until its imagery became the default setting for the American Christmas imagination. But the true saviour of Christmas, the man who infused the season with its modern emotional core, was a struggling English writer facing debt and creative pressure. In 1843, Charles Dickens wrote Asterisk, A Christmas Carol Asterisk, in a feverish 6 weeks. The story of Ebenezer Scrooge visited by the ghosts of Christmas past, present and yet to come was not merely a tale of supernatural redemption. It was a powerful social manifesto wrapped in a ghost story. Dickens, horrified by child poverty and the heartless logic of industrial capitalism, used the parable to argue that Christmas was not about feasting alone. It was about charity, compassion, and human connection across class lines. Scrooge's transformation from miser to benefactor, his care for Tiny Tim, became the moral blueprint for the holiday. God bless us everyone was the new benediction. Dickens successfully defined the Christmas spirit as one of obligatory generosity and familial warmth. He made keeping Christmas a moral imperative. The book was a sensation, adapted for the stage immediately, and Dickens himself became the high priest of his own invented tradition, performing public readings for decades. The final piece of the Victorian Christmas puzzle was provided by royalty. In 1840, Queen Victoria married her German cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Albert brought with him the German custom of the asterisk, Tannenbaum asterisk, the decorated Christmas tree. In 1848, the asterisk illustrated London News asterisk published an engraving of the royal family gathered around their ornamented tree at Windsor Castle. The image was a marketing miracle. If the young, beloved Queen and her family had a Christmas tree, every aspirational middle-class household in Britain wanted one. The custom spread with viral speed across Britain and then to America. The ancient pagan symbol of everlasting life, filtered through German folk tradition and boosted by celebrity endorsement, became the central indispensable icon of the domestic Christmas in less than a generation. Simultaneously, the Christmas card was invented. In 1843, the same year as Asterisk, A Christmas Carol Asterisk, Sir Henry Cole, a busy British civil servant, commissioned an artist to design a printed card he could send to all his acquaintances, wishing them a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. The idea of mass-produced seasonal greetings caught on, fueled by new postal reforms and printing technologies. What began as a convenience for one man soon became a social obligation for millions, creating yet another seasonal industry and ritual. The Victorian Christmas, then, was a conscious fabrication. The emphasis on children as the focus of the holiday was new. The emphasis on the family gathering around the tree in a private, cosy home was new. The notion of Christmas as a time of charitable giving driven by moral sentiment was powerfully new thanks to Dickens. The tree, the card, the standardized Santa, all were products or popularizations of this brief, creative period. They crafted a traditional Christmas to answer the anxieties of the industrial age. Loneliness, alienation, social unrest, by offering a vision of nostalgic, stable and benevolent domesticity. This is the Christmas we inherited, believing it to be ancient. It is, in its essential form, less than 200 years old. The 20th century completed the transformation, turning this Victorian family festival into the spine of global consumer capitalism. The figure of Santa Claus needed final standardization. Throughout the 19th century, his appearance fluctuated. He could be tall or short, thin or elf-like, dressed in various colours including green, blue or brown. The political cartoonist Thomas Nast, in a series of Harper's Weekly drawings from the 1860s onward, helped settle him into the rotund, bearded, fur-clad form we know. But the definitive makeover came from an advertising campaign. In 1931, the Coca-Cola Company, seeking to boost winter sales of its cold weather-averse product, hired illustrator Haddon Sundblom to create a series of Santa Claus advertisements. Sundblom's Santa was not a skinny elf or a stern bishop. He was a grandfatherly, robust, twinkling-eyed man, his red suit, coincidentally matching Coca-Cola's corporate colour, rich and warm. The campaign ran for decades, imprinting this specific friendly corporeal Santa onto the global consciousness. Did Coca-Cola invent Santa? No. Did they invent the red suit? Not quite. But they perfected, universalized, and irrevocably commercialized him. They made him a brand asset. Meanwhile, the rituals of Christmas were being systematically tied to commerce. In 1890, James Edgar, a department store owner in Brockton, Massachusetts, had the idea to dress as Santa and walk his shop floor. Children flocked to see him, and their parents flocked to shop. The department store Santa was born. By the early 1900s, every major retailer had one. The sacred pilgrimage to meet the magical gift-giver now led directly into a cathedral of consumption. The child's wonder was harnessed to drive sales. The Christmas shopping season itself was a retail invention. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, launched in 1924, was explicitly designed as a spectacle to mark the official start of the holiday shopping frenzy. Over decades, the season crept earlier, engulfing Thanksgiving, then Halloween, until Christmas merchandise appeared in stores while summer heat still simmered. Gift-giving, once a modest tradition, became an immense social and economic obligation. The pressure to buy for family, friends, co-workers, teachers, mail carriers became a central, often stressful feature of the season. The average household spending soared, with many financing the holiday through debt that would take months to pay off. The spirit of giving had been meticulously engineered into the engine of buying. The emotional texture of the modern Christmas is now largely crafted by advertising. Starting in October, a coordinated campaign begins to associate specific feelings: nostalgia, warmth, familial love, childhood joy with specific products. The commercials are mini melodramas, designed to trigger sentimental tears and then channel that emotion towards a purchase. The Christmas music that blankets every store is curated to induce a passive, nostalgic receptivity. Even the entertainment is part of the machine. The annual deluge of formulaic holiday movies on channels like Hallmark present a fantasy of small-town love and seasonal transformation, a fantasy carefully interspersed with commercials selling the very lifestyle depicted. The irony is thick. We consume hours of programming whose message is that the true meaning of Christmas is love, family, and simplicity, not materialism. But we consume it on a platform funded by and designed to promote materialism. Christmas has become the undisputed economic engine of the retail calendar. For many businesses, the final quarter of the year, dominated by Christmas shopping, represents the difference between profit and loss, survival and bankruptcy. Our collective participation is not just a tradition, it is an economic necessity. The holiday Dickens conceived as a critique of capitalist greed has become capitalism's most sacred and lucrative annual festival. But this engine has costs that are rarely tallied on the holiday balance sheet. Every shiny toy under a tree has a supply chain that often leads back to the harsh reality of a factory floor in Guangdong or Shenzhen. Workers labouring under intense pressure for long hours and low wages produce the gadgets and dolls that will be unwrapped in a frenzy of Western joy. The electronic devices that are perennial top gifts come from complexes like Foxconn, where conditions have been linked to worker suicides, leading to the infamous installation of anti-suicide nets. The fast-fashion Christmas sweaters and holiday outfits, worn once and discarded, are stitched together in the sweatshops of Bangladesh and Vietnam. The cosy mythology of Santa's workshop staffed by cheerful elves is a fairy tale that obscures a global network of often exploited labour. We enjoy the magic because we're insulated from the mechanics of its production. The psychological costs are equally profound, if less tangible. The pressure to create the perfect Christmas, the perfect meal, the perfectly decorated home, the perfectly chosen gifts, the perfect family harmony creates a mountain of stress, particularly for women, who still shoulder the majority of the holiday's planning and emotional labour. The gap between the idealised fantasy sold in commercials and the messy reality of family dynamics, financial strain and personal loneliness can be cavernous. For those who have lost loved ones, who are estranged from family, or who simply find the forced cheer suffocating, the season can be a period of intense isolation and depression. The demand to be joyful becomes a weight in itself, and at the heart of it all, we maintain the elaborate fiction of Santa Claus for our children, a systematic, years-long campaign of benevolent deception. We manufacture evidence, deflect doubts, and spin ever more complex tales to sustain the myth. Then, when the child's logic can no longer be denied, we dismantle the fantasy we so carefully built. Psychologists debate the long-term impact. Does it foster a healthy sense of wonder? Or does it teach children that even their closest guardians will orchestrate elaborate lies? The question lingers, even as we continue the tradition. We have traced the journey of Christmas from the primal fear of the solstice to the chaotic Roman festivals, through the strategic adoption by the Christian Church, the evolution of a Turkish bishop into a Dutch gift-giver, The terrifying shadow of the Dark Companions, the Puritan attempt at annihilation, the Victorian literary resurrection, and finally its capture and amplification by 20th century commerce. We are left with a holiday that is a palimpsest, a single parchment written over and over again by different cultures with different needs. The pagan sun worship is still there, in our strings of lights. The Roman Saturnalia is there, in our office parties and festive overindulgence. The Christian story of hope and incarnation is there for those who seek it. The Victorian sentiment is there, in our focus on family and charity, and the roaring, inescapable engine of global commerce is most certainly there, powering the entire spectacle. The modern Christmas is a festival of profound and unresolvable contradictions. It is a season that extols simplicity while driving unparalleled consumption. It praises peace and goodwill while generating familial tension and personal debt. It is rooted in a profound, primal human response to the cycles of nature, yet it is executed through the most artificial and globalized of supply chains. We are all complicit in this magnificent, stressful, and often beautiful hypocrisy. We know the tree is a pagan symbol, yet we find genuine comfort in its lights. We know Santa is a corporate icon, yet we see real wonder in our children's eyes. We resent the commercial frenzy, yet we feel compelled to participate. To understand Christmas is to hold these opposing truths in your mind simultaneously, to acknowledge that its power derives not from its purity, but from its layered, contradictory complexity. The psychological landscape of the contemporary Christmas is a terrain shaped by manufactured nostalgia. The ideal Christmas is not a memory, but an imported fantasy. A composite image built from fragments of Victorian literature, mid-century American advertisements, and personal childhood memories that are themselves filtered through these same cultural lenses. We strive to recreate a feeling that never existed in a singular historical form. The pressure to achieve this ideal is immense. Social media amplifies this pressure exponentially, becoming a curated gallery of perfect trees, flawlessly wrapped presents, and beaming family portraits. This virtual performance creates a tyranny of comparison, where individual, quiet, or messy celebrations feel like failures against the highlight reels of others. The financial burden is the most concrete manifestation of this pressure. The holiday generates staggering amounts of personal debt. Credit card balances swell in January as the bills for December's generosity arrive. The act of gift-giving, once a spontaneous gesture of affection, has been systematized into a stressful obligation. Lists are drawn up and budgets are strained. The fear of disappointing loved ones, appearing cheap or thoughtless, drives spending beyond rational limits. For many, the ghost of Christmas yet to come is a literal ghost of future financial anxiety, a spectre of interest payments that will haunt the first months of the new year. The economy depends on this collective annual splurge, making our participation feel almost civic, a duty to support the engines of retail and employment. We spend to keep the machine humming, even as the machine's demands leave us exhausted. Beneath the glittering surface of consumption lies the vast, often hidden human cost of production. The journey of a single Christmas ornament or electronic toy is a saga of globalized labor. It begins in factories where shifts are long, wages are minimal, and safety regulations can be lax. The workers who assemble our holiday magic are themselves unlikely to celebrate the holiday in the manner we do. Their reality is one of production quotas and overtime hours aimed at meeting Western demand. The environmental cost is another hidden ledger entry. The carbon footprint of shipping millions of tons of gifts across oceans, the waste generated by disposable decorations and non-recyclable packaging, the energy consumed by endless festive lighting. All these are the ecological consequences of the season's scale. The Christmas we celebrate in our warm, brightly lit homes is subsidized by a planetary and human cost that remains carefully out of frame, as unseen as Santa himself. Yet, even as we acknowledge these burdens and contradictions, something stubbornly genuine persists. It is not located in the presents or the pageantry, but in the cracks and pauses between them. It is the collective biological sigh of relief as the winter solstice passes and the days begin imperceptibly to lengthen. This is the ancient, immutable core. All the layers of religion and commerce are merely elaborate decorations hung upon this fundamental astronomical fact. The human need to mark this turn, to gather and reaffirm life in the face of darkness, is pre-cultural and profound. The Christmas tree, for all its commercialized ornaments, is at its heart a testament to this. It is a living thing brought inside, a defiant declaration that life persists even in the dead of winter. The lights we string are our modern version of the Yule log's flame, and the candles of Saturnalia, a communal defiance against the longest night. The gathering, for all its potential for drama, answers a deep social animal's need for connection. In an age of increasing digital isolation and fragmented communities, the enforced coming together of family and friends, however imperfect, serves an ancient purpose. Shared meals, shared stories, even shared annoyances, reaffirm bonds that the busyness of modern life can erode. The music, repetitive and ubiquitous as it is, creates a shared sonic landscape, a temporary communal culture that transcends individual taste. For a few weeks we're all listening to the same songs, hearing the same melodies in shops and cafes, participating in a low-grade passive communal ritual. The act of gift-giving, stripped of its obligatory and commercial distortions, still taps into a fundamental human impulse. It is the pleasure of considering another person, of seeking out an object or experience that will delight them, of symbolizing affection through a tangible offering. When it is not an obligation but a genuine gesture, it remains one of the most direct and personal forms of connection we have. The modern challenge is to rescue this core impulse from the machinery of expectation and consumption that has grown around it. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the modern Christmas is its blank slate quality, its capacity to be infused with personal meaning precisely because its traditional meanings have become so diluted. For the non-religious, it is a secular festival of family and light. For the devout, it remains a profound, holy day. For some, it is a time of quiet reflection. For others, a riot of social activity. It has become a cultural container so large that almost anyone can pour their own meanings into it. This very ambiguity is a source of both its commercial power and its personal resilience. It is not a fixed point but a flexible season, adaptable to the needs of the individual. The figure of Santa Claus himself embodies this ambiguity. He is a myth, a lie we tell children, a corporate logo, and yet he persists as a symbol of pure, unconditional generosity. The moment a child stops believing in Santa as a literal being is often the moment they begin to understand him as a principle. The spirit of giving without expectation of thanks, the magic of surprise, the joy of imagining a world where goodness is rewarded. In this way, the lie of Santa can be a gateway to a more nuanced ethical understanding. He becomes a story we tell about the kind of world we wish existed, a narrative of benevolence and wonder that we choose to keep alive, even after we know the mechanics behind it are fictional. Ultimately, Christmas endures not because of its theological correctness or its commercial efficiency, but because it addresses, however imperfectly, a suite of deep human needs at the darkest time of the year. The need for light, the need for community, the need for hope, the need for a story that suggests the universe is ultimately benevolent, the need for a pause, a feast, a moment of generosity that breaks the mundane cycle of getting and spending. The holiday we celebrate today is a collage. A piece of Roman Saturnalia is there in the office party where the boss makes a fool of himself. A piece of the Norse Wild Hunt is there in the image of an old man flying through the sky. A piece of medieval hagiography is there in the story of a saint who raised the dead. A piece of Puritan rectitude is there in our lingering anxiety about the holiday's excess. A piece of Victorian sentiment is there in the tearful climax of a holiday film. A piece of 20th century marketing genius is there in the red of Santa's suit and the jingle of a delivery truck. To walk through a modern city at Christmas is to walk through this layered history. The evergreen wreaths on the doors are pagan, the star on top of the tree is Christian, the frantic shoppers are enacting a 20th century ritual, the carolers on the street corner are channeling the Victorian revival. It is all happening at once, a simultaneous broadcast from every era of the past 2 millennia. The question is not whether we should celebrate this strange, compromised, magnificent holiday. The question is how we can celebrate it with our eyes open. To understand that when we light a candle, we are joining a line of ancestors stretching back to the first human who feared the dark. To know that when we give a gift, we are participating in an ancient economy of social bonds. To recognise that the stress and the joy are two sides of the same coin, both stemming from the immense weight of meaning we have asked this single season to bear. Christmas is a mirror. In its commercial glare, we see our materialism and our anxiety. In its quieter moments, we see our capacity for love, our longing for connection, and our stubborn, species-wide refusal to surrender to the winter dark. It is flawed, overburdened, and beautiful. It is our collective dream of warmth in the cold, a dream we have been refining and complicating for thousands of years. The dream is not pure, but it is persistent. And every December, as the world tilts away from the sun, we dream it again, adding our own small rituals and memories to the ever-growing tapestry, ensuring that the light in all its complex and contradictory glory never fully goes out. The endurance of Christmas, despite its contradictions and the weight of its own history, points to a fundamental human truth. We are creatures of rhythm and narrative. We require markers in time, stories that give shape to the year, rituals that pull us out of the mundane and into a shared symbolic space. The winter solstice provided the immutable astronomical rhythm. Every culture that followed layered its own narrative onto that pivot point in the solar year. Our modern Christmas is simply the current cacophonous chorus in that long song. To step back from the shopping lists and the party invitations is to witness a remarkable phenomenon. The way a society, increasingly secular and fragmented, still collectively agrees to pause and enact a story of light returning, of generosity, of a world momentarily softened. This collective agreement, however, is not uniform. The experience of Christmas fractures along fault lines of class, faith, and personal history. For the wealthy, it may be a season of lavish giving and tropical vacations. For the poor, it can be a period of acute stress and painful exclusion, where the media's relentless imagery of abundance underscores what they cannot provide. For devout Christians, it remains a profound theological event, the incarnation of God, though even that core is often crowded out by cultural noise. For immigrants from non-Christian cultures, it can be a time of dissonance, a mandatory participation in a national ritual that feels alien, or an opportunity to blend old traditions with new in unique syncretic ways. The Christmas spirit is often proclaimed as a universal, but its accessibility and meaning are deeply particular, shaped by individual circumstance. The holiday's homogenized commercial image also obscures the vibrant, living folk traditions that still cling to its edges in specific locales, traditions that resist the smooth, globalized Santa Claus narrative. In parts of Austria and Bavaria, the Krampus runs grow more popular, not less, as a deliberate counterpoint to sugary sentiment. In Puerto Rico, parandas, spontaneous musical house-to-house visitations that can last all night, maintain a communal, unpredictable energy utterly foreign to the scheduled nuclear family Christmas of American television. In Iceland, children still placate the Yule lads and fear the grilla. In Wales, the asterisk Mari Lwyd asterisk, a folk custom involving a horse skull carried door-to-door by singers engaged in a battle of rhyming insults, sees periodic revivals. These localized practices are reminders that before mass media, Christmas was 1,000 different regional festivals, each with its own peculiar ghosts and customs. The globalized commercial Christmas has not eradicated them. It has simply created a dominant, overpowering layer that often drowns them out. The digital age has introduced a new frontier for the holiday, transforming and extending its rituals. The Christmas playlist is now a global, algorithmic phenomenon. The social media performance of the holiday, the haul videos, the meticulously staged decoration reveals, the countdowns, creates a parallel virtual celebration that runs alongside the physical one. Online shopping has decoupled gift-giving from the physical pilgrimage to the mall, but has amplified the expectation of endless choice and rapid delivery, further straining the human beings in warehouses and delivery vans who form the holiday's logistical backbone. Video calls allow separated families to share a meal screen to screen, a new ritual born of diaspora and distance. The digital Christmas is both more connected and more isolating, more convenient and more demanding in its own way. Beneath all these layers, digital, commercial, regional, historical, lies the persistent, quiet power of the natural world. The Christmas season is, at its origin, a negotiation with ecology. The ancient fear was of winter itself, the cold that could kill, the darkness that could disorient, the scarcity that could starve. Every ritual, from the Yule log to the Solstice feast, was a technology for surviving this ecological reality. Modern insulation, electric light, and global food supply chains have largely tamed these immediate threats for many, but the psychological imprint remains. Our strings of lights are a prosthetic victory over the night. Our gargantuan meals are a performance of abundance in the face of historical scarcity. The evergreen in our living room is a tribute to life that endures in a dormant landscape. In an age of climate crisis, this ecological dimension of Christmas takes on a new ironic poignancy. We celebrate a festival born from human vulnerability to nature's cycles by engaging in consumption that exacerbates our disruption of those very cycles. The carbon footprint of the season is its own kind of ghost, a future spectre of climate consequence haunting the present feast. Perhaps this is the final defining paradox of modern Christmas. It is a ritual that simultaneously acknowledges our deep, ancient connection to the natural world and our frantic, modern attempt to insulate ourselves from it. We feel the primal pull to gather and feast as the dark closes in, but we do so in climate-controlled homes, eating food from across the planet, surrounded by objects born in factories oceans away. The holiday becomes a theatre where we perform our relationship with nature, a relationship now mediated by technology, commerce, and global systems so complex they become invisible. And what of the future of this sprawling, contested, beloved holiday? Trends suggest several possible paths. One is continued commercialization, where the season stretches ever longer, becoming less a distinct festival and more a prolonged year-end sales quarter with festive branding. Another is a kind of secular retreat, where the religious elements fade further into the background for many, and the holiday is redefined purely as a cultural festival of family, rest, and kindness, a winter break with historical decorations. A third is a resurgence of intentionality, where individuals and communities, weary of the drain and clutter, deliberately strip back the holiday to its core elements, gathering, feeding, resting, giving in mindful ways, in a conscious rejection of the commercial script. These paths are not mutually exclusive. They will likely all be trodden simultaneously by different groups. The story of Christmas is ultimately a story about how humans make meaning. We took a solar event and wrapped it in myth. We took those myths and merged them with new gods. We took the new gods and surrounded them with borrowed traditions. We took the traditions and sold them back to ourselves in glittering boxes. Through it all, the central impulse has proven remarkably durable. To create a point of light and warmth in the cold, to tell a story where hope is born in a humble place, to believe, if only for a few weeks, that generosity can be the governing principle of our world. When you stand in a quiet room after the guests have left, looking at the twinkling lights on the tree, you are standing in a river of time. The chill you feel on the window pane is the same chill that frightened a Neolithic farmer. The warmth of the fire, or its electric simulacrum, is the same warmth sought by a Roman reveller and a Viking warrior. The hope in your heart for the new year is the same hope that led a medieval peasant to mass and a Victorian clerk to buy a goose. The exhaustion you feel is the exhaustion of centuries of celebration, the accumulated weight of expectation. The holiday is flawed, burdened, and beautiful. It is a mirror held up to our best and worst impulses, our capacity for love and our propensity for waste, our need for community and our tolerance for exclusion, our reverence for the sacred and our mastery of the commercial. To celebrate Christmas with awareness is not to ruin it, but to deepen it. It is to understand that you're not just hanging an ornament on a tree, you're hanging it on a story 2,000 years thick. You're not just giving a gift, you're participating in an ancient economy of social bonds. You're not just enduring family, you're enacting the primordial human strategy for survival, huddling together against the cold. The story continues. The layers will keep accumulating. New traditions will be invented, old ones rediscovered. The arguments about what Christmas really means will never cease, because its meaning is not fixed. It is a living thing shaped by every person who chooses to bake a cookie, sing a carol, light a candle, or wrap a present. It is our collective, ongoing answer to the longest night. However faint or confused the answer has become, the fact that we still bother to give one year after year is itself a kind of miracle. The light returns. We are here to see it. And for a little while, we agree to be glad. This relentless seasonal return reveals a deeper truth. The resilience of Christmas lies less in its religious claims than in its function as a social contract. Year after year, we collectively agree to suspend the normal not out of pure piety, but because this ritual, however mongrel its origins, provides a rare and necessary social pause. In a world governed by efficiency, output, and individual striving, Christmas is a collectively sanctioned moment of non-productivity. It is a cultural command to stop, to gather, to consume in a permitted way, and to focus on intimacy. The collective value of this pause may be more profound than any singular religious or sentimental message. It is a rebellion against industrial time, and now digital time, a brief slide back into older, more cyclical agricultural time. Even as most of us have lost all connection to the soil, the nature of this contract is laid bare in the microcosm of family dynamics, and here it shows its sharpest edges. The Christmas family gathering is a highly compressed emotional field. Tensions managed through distance or busyness for 11 months are condensed into the finite space and time of a decorated living room and a laden table. It becomes an annual negotiation over recognition, belonging, unspoken grievances, and the currency of love. The gift exchange operates as the tangible tender of this negotiation. A thoughtfully chosen gift can signal deep understanding. A perfunctory one can be read as indifference or resentment. Table talk navigates generational gulfs and political divides. A precarious performance of unity where every comment carries extra weight. For many, the most authentic Christmas feeling is not joy, but a complex relief when it is over. The survival of another year's emotional gauntlet. This pressure cooker environment is amplified by the ghost of the ideal. The media-supplied fantasy of perfect harmony makes our own flawed gatherings feel like failures. The scuffed reality of Uncle Henry's political rants, the simmering silence between divorced parents, the children bored and oversugared, these are measured against the cinematic tableaus of loving smiles and heartfelt toasts. The dissonance creates a peculiar loneliness, a feeling of being outside the very warmth the season promises to provide. Yet, even within this friction, something necessary occurs. The gathering, however difficult, forces a confrontation. It demands acknowledgement. The shared history in the room, the old jokes, the familiar recipes, they create a temporary anchor of identity. We are reminded, for better or worse, of where we come from. This annual reckoning with origin may be messy, but it is a powerful counterforce to the rootlessness of modern life. The material artifacts of the season, the decorations and music, function as a kind of temporal architecture. They construct a distinct psychological space within the continuous flow of days. Walking into a home transformed by wreaths and lights is crossing a threshold into a different mode of being. The sensory cues are immediate and total. The scent of pine or cinnamon, the particular quality of multicoloured light reflecting off tinsel, the relentless soundtrack of familiar carols. This manufactured environment triggers a shift in expectation and behaviour. We are programmed to be more generous, more nostalgic, more forgiving within this space. It is a collective self-hypnosis, a willing immersion in a staged reality where different rules apply. The commercial world exploits this shift masterfully, but the shift itself is genuine. We have built a theatre for a specific emotional experience and then stepped onto the stage to perform it. This theatricality extends to the public sphere. The transformation of city centres and shopping districts into winter wonderlands is a civic performance of immense scale. It is a declaration that normalcy is suspended. The lights strung across streets are not just decorations, they are the modern equivalent of the boundary markers for sacred space. They delineate the Christmas zone, a territory where festivity is mandatory and grumpiness is a minor transgression. The public singing of carols, the Salvation Army bell ringers, the festive markets. These are participatory rituals that reinforce the contract. They offer even the solitary city dweller a role to play, a way to brush against the communal spirit without the intensity of family engagement. At the heart of this vast performance lies the central mystery of the modern Santa Claus. He has evolved beyond a mere gift-bringer. He has become the personification of the holiday's core paradox. He's the lie that tells a deeper truth about desire and benevolence. The child's belief is not in a literal fat man in a flying sleigh. It is a belief in the possibility of pure magical fulfillment, in a world where wishes are heard and answered by an agent of ultimate kindness. The eventual disillusionment, the so-called loss of magic, is actually a crucial transition. It is the moment the child internalizes the myth. Santa ceases to be an external being and becomes an internal principle. The child learns that the magic was not in the man, but in the actions of the parents, in the tradition of secret giving. They graduate from believing in Santa to believing in what Santa represents. In this way, the myth functions as a pedagogical tool, a narrative bridge from receiving to understanding the spirit of giving. The lie is the sugarcoating on a profound social lesson. This lesson, however, is constantly undermined by the very system that promotes it. The transition from mythic Santa to commercial Santa is jarring. The magical being who knows your deepest desires becomes a logo used to sell those desires back to you. The shift happens subtly. The child who sits on Santa's lap in the mall is not whispering a dream to a mystical figure. They're providing consumer data to a seasonal employee in a rented suit against a backdrop of branded merchandise. The enchantment is harnessed directly to the engine of commerce. This co-optation is so complete that it becomes invisible. We no longer question the strangeness of seeking magic in a temple of transaction. The mall Santa is the perfect symbol of the holiday's hybrid soul. Half ancient archetype, half marketing tool, simultaneously sparking wonder and moving inventory. The environmental and ethical footprint of the season grows heavier with each passing year, casting a long shadow over the festivities. The Christmas we celebrate is increasingly at odds with the ecological realities of the planet. The carbon emissions from travel, the waste from packaging and discarded decorations, the energy consumption of elaborate light displays, they form a hidden cost seldom accounted for in the season's joy. There is a growing tension between the inward, focused warmth of the holiday and its outward impact on a warming world. The evergreen tree, once a symbol of life enduring in a frozen landscape, now stands as an ironic monument in a world where winters are increasingly unstable. The feast of abundance feels different in an age of heightened awareness about food waste and unsustainable agriculture. A new layer of guilt and cognitive dissonance is being added to the traditional holiday stress. Simultaneously, the global supply chain that delivers our Christmas is a story of profound inequality. The hands that assemble the toys, sew the holiday sweaters, and mine the minerals for our new electronics often belong to people for whom the Christmas story of peace and goodwill is a distant fairy tale. Their reality is one of quotas, overtime, and subsistence wages. The sparkling product under our tree is the end point of a journey that may involve exploitation and environmental degradation. Our celebration is subsidized by this invisible labor and sacrifice. The mythology of Christmas cheer is built quite literally on a foundation of globalized inequity. To ignore this is to participate in a willful blindness, to accept the wrapped gift without asking about the price paid elsewhere. And yet, within this matrix of contradiction and cost, small acts of genuine meaning persist. They are not found in the grand gestures or expensive gifts, but in the cracks and interstices. The quiet decision to donate to a food bank instead of buying another trivial gift. The conscious choice to simplify to make gifts by hand, to focus on presents over presents. The stubborn local tradition that defies the homogenized national narrative. The moment of real connection across a dinner table, when the performance drops and something authentic is shared. These are not solutions to the holiday's colossal problems, but they are points of resistance. They are ways for individuals to reclaim a shred of the season's original intent, to wrest a piece of meaning back from the machinery of consumption. The future of Christmas will be shaped by how we navigate these tensions. It may splinter into distinct experiences, a hyper-commercial version for those who embrace the spectacle, a minimalist ethical version for those seeking sustainability, a digitally mediated version for dispersed families, a resurgent, locally rooted version that revives old folk ways. It will likely not be one thing, but many. The holiday's great strength is its adaptability. It has absorbed Roman sun gods and Norse hunters. It will absorb climate anxiety and digital life. Its core function, to mark the solstice and create light in darkness, is too fundamental to disappear. The forms will change. The lights may become LED, the gifts may become virtual, the gatherings may happen in virtual reality, but the impulse will remain. To participate in Christmas today is to hold a galaxy of contradictions in one's hands. It is an act of faith, not in a theological doctrine, but in the ongoing human project of making meaning. We are taking a raw astronomical fact, dressing it in 2,000 years of borrowed robes, and using it to tell ourselves a story about who we are and who we wish to be. The story is flawed, inconsistent, and often hypocritical, but we keep telling it. We need to tell it. In the depth of winter, we need a narrative that insists light follows darkness, that community is stronger than isolation, that generosity can be a governing principle, if only for a few weeks. The Christmas tree in your living room is more than a decorated plant. It is a time capsule. Its lights hold the memory of Roman candles and Viking bonfires. Its ornaments hold the ghosts of Victorian inventors and Madison Avenue advertisers. The gifts beneath it hold the sweat of unseen workers and the hopes of the givers. The family around it holds the entire complicated history of love and conflict. It is a messy, beautiful, overwhelming symbol of everything we have been and everything we are trying to become. The season will pass, the tree will come down, the bills will arrive. But for a short while we agreed to believe in a brighter story, and that act of collective belief, however compromised, is itself a kind of miracle in a disbelieving age. The longest night comes, and we're still here, together, turning on every light we can find. And so we arrive here, at the end of our unwrapping. What remains when all the layers are spread out before us? Not a single pure truth, but a tangled, brilliant knot of human history. Christmas is not a fraud, though it is built on fictions. It is not a genuine ancient tradition, though it is woven from threads older than memory. It is a living argument, a collective dream we have been refining for millennia. We began by observing the strange spectacle from a distance, noting its apparent insanity. We traced its roots to the primal terror of the dying sun, to the Roman frenzy of Saturnalia, to the quiet, desperate hope embedded in a Yule log's flame. We saw a pragmatic church baptize a pagan date, and a fierce Turkish bishop slowly morph through Dutch sailors and New York poets into a jolly corporate icon. We met the dark companions who once made the season terrifying, and the Puritans who tried and failed to ban it altogether. We witnessed Victorian novelists and princes invent the cosy traditions we call ancient, and we followed the relentless march of commerce as it standardized, packaged, and sold the dream back to us. We confronted the costs, the hidden labor, the psychological strain, the environmental debt, the weight of expectation. The story is one of constant borrowing, adaptation, and often outright theft. Every element is second-hand. The date, the tree, the gifts, the saint. All are refugees from other beliefs, other times, other needs. Christmas has no origin point. It has only a process of accumulation. It is the ultimate cultural recycler. Yet, this is not a story of corruption. It is a story of resilience. The power of Christmas lies precisely in this mongrel heritage, in its ability to absorb everything, fear, faith, chaos, commerce, and transmute it, however imperfectly, into a story of light. It is a psychological and social tool of remarkable durability. It forces a pause in the grim business of life. It mandates gathering in an age of isolation. It scripts generosity in an economy of selfishness. It offers a narrative of hope exactly when the natural world seems most hopeless. To celebrate Christmas with open eyes is to participate in a profound human ritual with full knowledge of its contradictions. It is to string lights knowing they echo solstice fires. It is to give a gift acknowledging the complex chain of hands that brought it to you. It is to gather with family while accepting the beautiful, painful complexity of that bond. It is to find genuine warmth in a festival engineered for sentiment. The holiday is a mirror. In its commercial glare, we see our materialism and anxiety reflected back. In its quieter moments, in the genuine smile across the table, the unexpected kindness, the shared silence before the twinkling tree, we catch a glimpse of something else. Our stubborn, species-wide refusal to surrender to the dark. We are the animals who tell stories against the night. Christmas is simply our most elaborate, most conflicted, and most persistent winter tale. The rituals will continue to evolve, the commercial pressures will intensify, the debates about its meaning will never cease. New layers will be added, old ones may be stripped away. But the core impulse, forged in the fear of ancient winters, will remain. We will always need to mark the turn of the sun. We will always need to come together and make light. So this season, when you hear the familiar music, when you see the lights against the black sky, understand that you're not just observing a holiday. You're stepping into a river of time. You're taking your place in a chain of celebration that stretches back to the first humans who huddled around a fire, praying for dawn. You're participating in the ongoing, magnificent and deeply human project of creating warmth in the cold. The story is flawed. It is ours, and we keep telling it. The longest night passes, the light returns. We are here to witness it, and to add our own small, bright chapter to the endless tale.